Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Thanks for showing up for another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. And today my guest is Melissa Nash. We're going to talk to you about how she rebuilt her financial future one property at a time. And she's going to give you the advice how you can too, build or rebuild. She founded Lady Luck Investments. Let's go. This is episode 226 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Melissa Nash. Melissa is the founder of Lady Luck Investments, which emerged out of necessity. She personally built a portfolio that secured her family's financial future in less than 6 years, and now she's bringing it to other women to help them do the same. She wants to change the story of women in real estate, create a legacy of wealth and empowerment. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to meet you. And thank you for that wonderful intro.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, some people say they want me to show up in the morning and just give them the great intro to get ready for the day. So, whatever works. But
That's a good idea.
yeah, it just makes you feel great to start the day. I wanted to start with something interesting that I got in the pre-form because you said something about your husband's grandmother being an investor in the 60s. So let's start there because maybe that is your intro to real estate.
It kind of inspired me, but she didn't have the opportunity to teach me because she passed away. But her story is really inspiring. And in fact, I kind of created a little bit of a story within that story that I'll share with you if that's okay.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, absolutely.
I love to compare. So my husband's grandma was buying real estate in Los Angeles in the 60s and 70s, which is so rare anyways. A, female. B, she was a real estate investor, and her son was actually an actor in Hollywood. Not my husband's father, but the uncle. And basically, if you see any movie in the 60s with a red-haired kid, that's him. Nice. Because that's when Technicolor came out, and everybody wanted, the red-haired kid. And so she was in LA, dropping him off at movie sets. And she was like, what am I going to do? And so she ended up getting a real estate license and she started selling houses. And then she would take the commission from every house because she was married and her husband paid for their overhead. So she was able to take that commission and so the story is she says she didn't really know what to do with the money, but she knew real estate grew. So she would buy rental properties. Yeah. So, which was crazy. So I didn't know her at this time. Clearly wasn't born in Elm Story. So when I met my husband, they would talk about his rich grandma. But I knew her as she was disco grandma. Her husband passed away in the 70s. And so what I have kind of gathered and went back is when he passed away, she was able to live off of her rental income.
Wow.
So she provided for herself at a time when a lot of women couldn't or didn't. And so that right there was just crazy inspiring to me. So by the time I met her when we got married, she was on cruises and in Mexico with her girlfriends. And she was super fun and super hip. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is really cool. But my husband's memory of it is a little different because his memory of it growing up was, there was a bad tenant and she needed a turnover and we would have to go clean out one of my grandma's houses and she would pay us. And, so he was detoured from it because of that experience, but I was inspired by it. And then I would compare my grandmother, who I only had one grandparent that I knew, and she was an immigrant and she worked really hard and she had her W-2, and when she finally retired when she was 70, she had a pension. barely thrived and barely survived.
Yeah.
And so I compare the two grandmas.
It's
And
really
I'm
like
like,
rich grandma, poor grandma here. You're setting a
totally.
new book. I love it.
It
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what did grandma one do? What if, my grandmother, who was an immigrant, when she retired and she sold her home, what if she would have bought rental properties instead?
Yeah.
She just put it in a bank account. It all disappeared.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what inspired me, but I never really got to, from what I understand about, we'll call her rich grandma, disco
Yeah.
grandma.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah.
I never got to have those conversations with her. All I know is that she just was like, hey, I know real estate grows. And then when she passed away, her kids inherited that portfolio. And then they were able to use it to go further in life and, secure their future. So
Yeah.
to me, I was like, okay, real estate creates wealth and it secures your family for generations. And that's all I had in the back of my mind. And I was like, I got to figure this out.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, these stories are great because, I grew up with a dad who was an investor. So at 2 years old, I've been walking properties. So 50 years now of just walking homes. But it lets new investors know that not really much has changed. There's a lot of technology out there, but the way that you go about doing real estate really hasn't changed in 50, 60, 70 years. You find properties that you can get a good deal on that are likely to appreciate, which is basically everything in America over time, and you secure them. And now you have options to secure them at a variety of different levels. And if you wait long enough and get the rental income, you get a double windfall of cash flow and appreciation. I mean, I think that new people think there's some, new thing that you can put on it. But everybody I know who's successful is just doing what my dad did in just a mildly different way.
Yeah. And it's just holding because, she did some creative strategies that I now know that she did, but I didn't understand it. Like she would 1031 exchange and she sold the little houses and bought a couple apartment complexes.
Pretty awesome. I mean,
it's really awesome.
Yeah.
But I didn't know about any of that because she didn't talk about that part of it when I first met her. But it's now that I'm realizing, oh my gosh, she did all of this stuff. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, what a story. And I mean, to me, it's just unfortunate that we have to say, oh my gosh, how could a woman do that at that time? But it's actually true. So, I mean, now I love what you're doing because you do want to focus on helping women get to a next level because it's still a landscape that is architecturally challenged in between men and female. It's certainly gotten so much better over the years, but still it's a primarily male business, hopefully changing along the way.
It is. And you know what? The biggest thing that I found, it's not that I feel like I definitely have all opportunities in the market. You just make them happen. You just have the courage and you just have to do it. I've been mansplained a lot and people kind of shut you down and they're like, oh, can I talk to your husband?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the most common one. My project manager, who was on episode 7 way back in the day, she's a female and, they've tried everything, but she now uses it to her advantage and she pretends like she's a confused housewife instead of the owner and it helps her. So she knows how to play the game as well. But yeah, I think that mansplaining is a commonality. What I have found is though, the true people in the business who start off like that, who now then hear the response from somebody who knows what they're talking about, that goes away. They're like, oh, they realize their mistake then like, oh, now I get it. And then they're very responsive. At least in my experience, that's what I've seen.
Yeah. And I'm not offended by it. I mean, hey, it is what it is. And everybody should have to earn their respect, whoever it is, whoever you're talking to, whoever you're working with, we all kind of need to do that. Sometimes I've had to do it a little bit more than others, but it's, it's fine. My goal is absolutely to, number one, teach my daughters how to create financial freedom for themselves and how to empower themselves and go for it and not be afraid and have the courage. And then with that is other women out there, which I've been super passionate about.
Yeah, and there's a difference between poor assumptions and sexism. There is a difference. It's in the reaction and then the expectations. So I think that's an important point. Well, so how did you get started? When did you decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to go for it and I'm going to start plunking money down on real estate?
Yeah. So I actually failed pretty bad 3 times.
That's good. That's always a great lesson because a lot of people fail once, quit and just give it up and then kind of think about it a lot, which you probably did each time until it worked. So tell us what happened.
Well, I think I got in my own way because I thought I don't know, maybe just ego. And I always remember I had that rich grandma in the back of my mind, knowing that it does work. And that's why I
Yeah.
kept going. My first property, my husband and I were actually living in Atlanta, Georgia area. And at the time, I mean, houses were just so affordable, but the
Yeah.
loans were just crazy, the loans they were giving out. And so we went in to get a loan for a rental property after we bought our first property. And they're like, hey, we'll give you 100% loan, no money down for an investment property. Like those days are gone.
Yeah. Boy, I wonder what happened with that mortgage crisis there.
Well, yeah, there's a lot more to that story.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, and by the way, we'll pay your closing costs. So here's another 5%. So I didn't have to work. I didn't have to understand anything. I didn't know that I had to understand, the rent still need to cover the mortgage with all the things. And
Yeah.
I thought I could just throw a tenant in there and manage it myself. And I didn't vet them. And that went bad really quickly. And also the bank that I used was it was like a really small independent, maybe a credit union. I can't remember. But anyways, and so that went south really fast for a lot of reasons.
What was the main reason that it went south? Is it tenant or just financial projections?
Tenant, and I had no plan to cover the rents when the tenant didn't pay.
Yeah. Yeah. You assume like, hey, that can't happen, even though everybody says it can.
Right. There was no plan. That's the problem. There was no math. There was no plan. There was no relationship building. That plan failed. And so I kind of, picked up my feet. Years later, we had moved to Washington and the market was booming. This was like 2006, 2007. Prices were going up, all this stuff was going on. And I was like, now's the time to buy another rental property.
Yeah.
So I bought another rental property, again, just thinking that's all I had to do. And it was just going to magically appreciate. And I was going to get wealthy from that, like grandma did.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't add in, expenses, the tenants, needed, I don't know, there was plumbing bills, all kinds of stuff. I didn't account for those. I ended up selling that property for a loss because of what happened in 2009, 2010. We all know that. Sold that one. And then, but also I had bought a second one. And now this one's kind of funny. I bought it as a short-term rental in 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that there was a term short-term rental. It was a property down on the Washington coast. I didn't even know how I was going to market it. There was no Airbnb, all these things. I couldn't even find a cleaner that would go and do the turnover.
Yeah.
So I found a website and I can't remember what the name was. It was like a trading website where you could trade with other hosts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Gosh, I can't remember the name of them. And so I was basically using that for some of the rentals so that we could go on vacation other places.
Yeah.
And then I was just telling friends and family and putting things in Craigslist. It was kind of the wild, wild west. And I would tell the guests, you have to turn over the house yourself because I don't have a cleaner.
Boy, would that not go over well in today's environment of short-term rentals, as you know.
And my goal was just, hey, if it just kind of covers itself or close to it, it's fine. Our family uses it. We enjoy it. And it's going to go up in value and we're going to get rich in the long term. I kind of it was always long term, but I couldn't figure out how to make money in the short term.
Yeah. Do you think it was because you didn't have enough time to spend on actually the property itself, or just because you were kind of in this, what I think a lot of people, they're only focused on the best case scenario, when I always think like focus on the worst case scenario, not to convince yourself not to do the deal, but your number projection should be, this is what could happen if it goes terrible. Then everything looks amazing. Like, oh, wait, I'm up 200 instead of down. There's no plumbing issue. Great. What was the main problem at that time? Because obviously you fixed it now.
Yeah, I wasn't willing to learn. I think I wasn't willing to go after the education to figure out how to successfully do it, like how to run the math, how to, include rents and vacancy and taxes and insurance and, all the things. I didn't understand that I actually should be running the math and focusing on, like you said, what is the worst case scenario? I just kept focusing on the best case scenario, which to me was what I saw his grandma do, which is just hold them for a long time and they're going to grow. I did not look at the short term, like keeping them successful and stable and all the headaches that could happen. I just saw that, end of the rainbow kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I think that's where the 1% rule doesn't work anymore, but is still a tough metric because that just is just a comparison between rent and sales price and doesn't, you could have huge capex that you don't know, especially for out-of-state investors who aren't doing enough due diligence. Wow, those numbers look great. Yeah, you didn't know, you didn't see the basement, you don't know that a furnace is coming due right away, for $9,000. That's what can kill a lot of rentals. What was the thing that changed after those two properties that helped you go in a different trajectory with real estate?
Yeah. So in the meantime, this entire time, I had built up a business with my husband. It was actually a clothing brand. And so that was our income. That was everything. We were importing from overseas, and we had a whole warehouse and a staff, and that was our business. And by 2012, years prior to that, we sold wholesale to stores, and we slowly started seeing them closing their doors. We were losing our clientele, and then we were stuck with all this inventory and this huge warehouse. And that's when the economy really just it tanked. And when we didn't have any more customers to sell our stuff to because they were all closing down, our business, basically, we had to shut our business down. And looking back, I say the number one fault in that is we were not recession proof.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to buy designer clothing at that time. So in my mind, I was like, okay, what are we going to do? We need something that's recession proof. And so that kind of is where I was like, real estate. So we had moved to California by that time, and I got my real estate license because I thought, I'm going to become an agent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hated it. Like I'm not a good, like, hey, let's hop in the car, drive around and, check out how big the master closet is.
Yeah.
And,
you want to pull over at all the dumps. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Like I was not in it for that. I wanted like quick action. And so I kind of switched over to commercial real estate. And then through that, I started learning and talking to investors.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was like, okay, that's the direction I need to be going. And by the way, everything I learned in real estate school was nothing. I learned zero about investing, nothing. It was kind of worthless. It was just a piece of paper. And so I kind of went down that path. In the meantime, I got a corporate job, and I was just kind of stuck at their whim. And I was just, this is terrible. This is not my time. I'm not controlling my day, all the things. And so that's where my real estate education just kept on growing and learning. And then I was finding podcasts and, just kind of going down that road. And then I kind of found a mentor. And I started working with him, and that just kind of blew my mind. And I first got introduced to turnkey real estate. And so my very first property was a basic, nothing fancy, little rental property in Alabama that was done. And to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to renovate it. They're handing me the numbers essentially, and it was my job to confirm the numbers. But the renovations were done. They had a property manager. They had just placed a tenant. Like I was like, this is the magic thing that I was looking for.
Yeah.
And with the goal of holding long term. So I bought this little property, and everything was going great. And then I got a call, not that long after, and they said, hey, the tenant has moved on. And by the way, we found a squatter. All your copper was stolen. Everything of value was gone.
This is number 4 here for you. This is crazy.
Yeah. But you know what? I'm glad it happened that early, because I went, you know what? This is solvable. Like I had prepared for it at this point. That's the difference. I had money set aside.
That's also not your fault, though. The other stuff you could attribute to neglect or things that you didn't know. But that was a property management error. It's their job to secure the property and the tenant. So you bought into a system that should have fixed the errors that you had before, but their user error is what caused that one. So definitely, I see it as different.
Yeah, but I was prepared. That's the big difference. I was prepared. I knew that something like this would happen at some point. I didn't want it to happen that early.
Yeah, that one, your husband was probably like, I told you so again. That's what my grandmother said back in the day when I was trying to go get the rents.
Yeah, I don't remember if I told him.
Yeah, just skip that one over dinner. Yeah. Oh, no, it's going great. Yeah, we're just switching tenants. Much better. Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
But, I'm glad it happened because I was prepared, and I was like, okay, Worst case scenario, it happened, did it, fixed it. They moved a new tenant in, and that tenant literally was in the property for the next 6 years.
Yeah.
They never moved all through COVID. I had the same tenant. They were Section 8, so I got my rent check. Like, it's been great. And so that property really did give me, even though that happened, it gave me the courage and the confidence to keep on going.
Yeah, I mean, that is the success of you get past the one that makes you want to quit again. And then it's like, oh, wait, 6 years of a tenant with very little problems. That's really what everybody's going for. It's just about how are you going to get there and what vehicles are you going to use to try to get there? And we can choose the wrong vehicles as well. Some people struggle with Section 8. It's not easy for management. If you have a good manager, you get it. Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode with Melissa Nash. If you want to find out more about what she does, she has a free 12-day real estate email course. So you're not committed. You're getting the emails to find out how she did what she did. To find it, go to hellomelissanash.com, and then you'll see it right at the top. You click the button that says grab it here. Let's get back to Melissa. So where did you go from there? That one turned around and I said, okay, let's keep doing this, I guess.
Yeah. So I bought a couple more in the same market.
Yeah.
Because I was smart. Like, hey, let's not break, or it's not broken. I mean, let's just kind of not change. So I bought a couple more. And then I was kind of like, I want to do this a little bit faster. I mean, turnkey is great to me. I think it fit all the boxes for me, but I wanted a little bit more cash flow because again, I wanted to leave that job. I didn't want to be there. And so I was like, how am I going to kind of ramp this up a little bit? And so I kind of wanted to do the short-term rental thing again. And this was in 2018. And so now that I knew how to run numbers, even though for short-term rentals, I didn't really know, at least I knew like what I needed to dive after and go for and try to research.
Yeah. I mean, Airbnb was there. There was no AirDNA yet really to run the data for you, but you could at least go on Airbnb. And I used Vrbo and HomeAway like 20 years ago to do short-term rentals, but it wasn't the same type of platform. But at least you could look in the markets and just go on Airbnb and say, oh, this is what is renting, like their schedule is booked. Because I've always said, if you don't want to spend for data or use a company, just go in the areas and then look at their schedules and what's booked, and you can learn a lot just by hovering.
Yeah. Well, and I called a local property manager and I was like, give me the numbers. I go, tell me what houses are being booked. How often are they being booked? What is the nightly rate? I kind of went straight to a source because at this time, I didn't know I could manage properties myself from that far away. Yeah. So it was always going to be, my Alabama properties had a property manager. So this one was going to have a property manager. That was, and so anyway, so they gave me all the numbers and I went, okay, let's do this. And that first property, I was able to get into it for only 10% down because I used it as a second home.
Yeah.
And then they had it was right before Christmas. It was very chaotic. They had it rented out before we closed on it because we wanted to get the bookings that year. And I also wanted the tax breaks for that year. So they had it pre-booked. So we were pretty stressed. My husband and I drove up to the cabin. It was a condo, which also not a fan of anymore. The HOAs
can create havoc now for sure if it's not strictly everyone there is doing short term.
Well, yeah, there were a lot, but HOA was just chaos. But anyways, so we drove up there with a U-Haul and literally spent 2 days up there just, redoing everything, bringing in all the supplies and everything. And I had also gotten lists from the property manager. I go, send me a list of everything that we want. How many towels, how many sheets, all that, use the property managers for information.
That's a big change, though. If you look at your trajectory from the beginning ones to this, it's that asking an expert to help you is really the key to this, and knowing like, hey, if I use an expert and trust them and build a relationship, then I don't have to try to do all the work. Because if you would have tried to do it all, you could have ended up the way it was with the old one. This is like, well, now they have the data, they're the local expert, and you're going to rely on it. You're at least hedging your bets for like a much better start to the process.
Yeah. And I also was running worst case scenarios, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
And I thought worst case scenario, now I knew that there were tax,
Yeah.
loopholes.
Yeah.
And, so I was like,
Legal loopholes, which is
right,
fantastic. Yeah.
right. It's a law. They're tax
Yeah.
laws.
Yeah, exactly. They're there for all the accountants I've had on the show says, listen, the tax code is there for a reason. They want you to use it. It's not a trick to tell you that you can do it. Like it's sitting there for you. Just most people don't use it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I kind of came prepared. So my knowledge was better. I ran the worst case scenarios. So that property ended up just booking out. I mean, crazy. Like, and by the way, I put a lot of effort and time into really good mattresses and sheets. And, the decor was really nice. And I knew that because I had compared to other rentals in the area that just looked like grannies,
Yeah.
dust filled home. And
Those still exist, by the way. The people they just don't want to change, but they're getting crushed now.
yeah. And I was like, you know what? I can do better than that. I can make more money if I'm not going to stay at those. Where do I want to stay? And so, man, my place was booked. I mean, it just went crazy. And that's what made the HOA mad, because then everybody else was like mad, jealous of me because I was so booked.
I mean, swap out the granny furniture. Come on.
So they started putting pressure on me, like, you need to pay more towards HOA because you have more people.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Just nonsense.
Yeah.
But anyways, and then I realized that the property managers were making 30%. And
that's tidy.
And so I went, what if I did this myself? How hard would it be if I made that 30%? Because now if I made that 30%, that's my next property. That's a big chunk. So then that was my next path, is like, I got to figure out how to manage it myself. So I went down that path successfully. I love hosting, and I figured out all the automations, everything. I've got it dialed down. So now I've got 5 short-term rentals, and I self-manage all of them. And I honestly don't spend more than 20 minutes a day on them.
Locationally, are they all in the same area or all over the place?
All over the place. I have some in California and I have some in Utah.
Yeah, see that when you self-manage, you can be further away. It's like if you're using outside management, you want to cluster them more like you did with the Section 8s, because then management becomes cheaper. But yeah, I believe that if you're committed to running your short-term rentals like a business, anybody can self-manage, as long as you learn some stuff from pros along the way and are attentive. If not, you have to hire it out, because you're going to lose to the algorithm with one bad review just because you were busy. And obviously you've learned that that's the important thing. It's how much you take care of the guests that are there and make sure that you're, I would say, ahead of the curve on the things that they're going to ask for.
You have to be a good host. That number one, if you don't care about your guests, you should not be a host.
Yeah. I mean, that goes to me for landlords as well. I mean, if you look at traditional long-term rentals, I've always said the best landlords who get the best tenants are the ones who care about the tenants. The ones who are AKA slumlords, they don't care about the tenants. And then they're like, I can't believe the tenants don't take care of the property. I mean, that's just silly. If your Airbnb listing is, unresounding and doesn't tell them things like there's a steep hill or, there's no fence for dogs, and then they go and then they're going to complain, but it's really our fault. That's what I learned early in short-term rentals with my sister 20 years ago. Most of our mistakes in the beginning were things that we just didn't put out there. And then we would adjust and realize, okay, every time someone gives us feedback, that's a time to revisit our description and what we're sending in advance to make sure, our avatar for that property is correct, because, not everybody's a fit for that specific short-term rentals.
Yeah. And, one thing that I've done is I walk through now at this point, anytime I get somebody that asks a question about something, I'm like, there needs to be a system for that. And then I create a system or an answer for that. Like, you wouldn't be surprised. You would be surprised. One of my cabins is about an hour and a half from LA. Well, a lot of LA people love going to the mountains to see the snow and everything, but they don't know how to do a fire, like in a fireplace.
Yeah. If they're not on Survivor, I mean, you just may not know or think a lighter is just going to get the job done.
Yeah. So I literally, the first problem we had where somebody was just like, I don't know what to do. The house is smoked out. I literally created a book at the house, how to start a fire. Oh, you
mean in the fireplace? Yeah.
The fireplace.
Yeah. That has happened so many times. They just didn't open the flue and you're like, oh, wow. Yeah. You got to leave it. Again, that's a great point though, because I think when you're a short-term rental host, you have to think like, just people don't know stuff. It's not because they're dumb. It's because they've never had a fireplace. So why would they know? So I just remember in the old days before universal remotes, you would go to a short-term rental because I always stayed in short-term rentals my whole life. There'd be like 6 remotes and I'm very techy and I'm like, I don't know what to do. There's too much going on here. Could you just tell me which one is which? And I think people started to learn all along the way, like just tell people how to do everything just in case.
Yeah, I had a celebrity stay at, because we're so close to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
There's a lot of celebrities that stay, and it's not always them that book it. But this particular celebrity, definitely not going to say their name, but they were the worst guests I've ever had. Like literally the worst. It was horrible. In fact, I was out of the country. I was in Europe with my family for Christmas, and I had a co-host that was helping me. And it was about the fireplace. They could not start a fire and they kept smoking themselves out.
Yeah.
And we had my 2 handymen like the night before Christmas showing them how to start a fire. And then they would leave. Yeah. And then this person would kept throwing these crazy logs on it before it even got hot.
Yeah.
It was
hoping for the best.
Oh, and then they were demanding a refund. And I mean, it was the most horrible guest I've ever had to this day.
Yeah, well, we got into the habit of just kind of quick evicting people. Like if they started complaining too much, we're like, we'll refund you if you just leave now. Like I don't care. I just don't want to deal with it. Like you're over the barrel. I tried to vet them in the beginning. We also had a system if they asked extra questions that were obviously in there already, we would just decline the booking. I think you kind of get a vibe over the years of who's going to be bad, but there's always a few that slip through because sometimes one party in a couple is booking it and then the another is starting to message and you're like, oh, this doesn't sound like the person that was just like, cool, I can't wait to get there.
Right. But, like you said, anytime that there's something where, I think you have to be willing to take responsibility if you're going to be a good host. And instead of blaming them, I just go, okay, if I were in their shoes, what did I do wrong and how can I avoid this next time? What communication do I need to add? Or, a laminated book, how to start a fire.
Yeah.
How do I do this?
Now, our suggestion is always to just make videos because then you get a better connection too, which I think really helps. But yeah, look, some people are very annoying, but sometimes their advice is pretty good. The people who say, like I have this joke with a couple STR people, like they said, we always say pasta maker is out of bounds. Like you don't need a pasta maker, but a waffle maker, I would buy that. It's like $20-$30. What's the big deal? A lot of people use it. You have to really decide over time, is what they're asking for reasonable? Will other people also ask for this? And also take our ego out of the game. Oh, I think my place is perfect. I can never make a mistake. Sometimes they have really good feedback and tips.
Yeah. And I've also taken away amenities that cause problems.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
If I have something and that amenity breaks or the person before didn't tell me that it was broken or they stole it, because that is a thing, not very often, but things do go missing. And the next person will be like, well, wait a minute, I thought you had this, or that is broken, like bikes, for example.
Oh, yeah.
That's something that the tires go flat all the time. So I had bikes at 2 of my properties and I took them away because I cannot pay to have, if somebody takes it down the road.
Just a bike pump person?
Yeah, I can't do that. And so the next person is going to be really disappointed that the tire is flat or something is broken. And so I do take away things that are nice to have, but realistically are going to cause way more problems.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Now, you actually mentioned something similar when you're just talking about maintenance and upkeep of your long-term rentals. It is important to kind of always be looking at your properties. Yeah, what's causing a problem? What's going well? Oh, that's going well. Let's do more of that. Somebody liked the guidebook that had restaurants. Well, let's update that with other things that they can do, hikes and things like that. But like you said, especially anything dangerous, when someone says, oh, we tripped, 3 people say they tripped on the stairs, it's time to evaluate that because it's not just a one person. We always say 1 thing, you're going to think about it. 2, you better get it done because it's not random.
Yeah. And I would say I love, honestly, even though I've had issues and problems since my first rental, so that was 2018 now. But overall, I love it. I love hosting. I love my properties and I put so much love into them. and the guests really love it. And they've had amazing moments at my houses. I've had, engagements, I've had celebrations, I've had anniversaries. I've even had people that lost a loved one and went to my cabin to, decompress in the mountains. And I feel like I feel almost like I've been a part of so many amazing things. So while yes, there has been negative, I really do enjoy hosting, which is shocking to me. I didn't think I would. But again, it's also because I have really good systems in place and I'm not sitting there responding, to every little thing. My systems and my communication take care of it. And then I'm just there as support.
Yeah. I stopped doing them for a long time because my sister kind of handled the bookings when we did it, and I was just like around choosing properties and stuff like that. But I think I'm ready to get back in because I see the technology that I can use as an enhancement, not as a replacement for me, but as something that can be a middle person. I always need kind of a buffer, and technology is a buffer to make sure. I also know how to produce, like we're saying, adapt and produce things that are going to help people have a better time. And I think that that's really the key of it. Do you think that your growth success for your portfolio, is it combined for short-term rentals and long-term rentals, that diversity?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So the short-term rentals gave me more cash flow quicker. So today,
you open them, they're producing.
Exactly. So I've been able to turn that money faster into more properties, but I've sold a couple short-term rentals. I've owned 9 over the last 6 years, and now I only have 5. So I've sold some because I took that money and I did 1031 exchange to buy the next one up, the more expensive one, or to buy more long-term rentals. I'm just constantly turning over and using to my advantage, the equity, either whether I've done cash out refinances on some properties. I'm constantly turning over the money, and that's the key. That is how you grow, whether you're refinancing or HELOC or 1031 exchange. I would not be here where I am today and been able to leave that corporate job if I didn't figure out some way to accelerate it to get more.
Right. Without adding more income of your own, you're taking the properties and letting them appreciate. That's really smart. And I think it's definitely something that I've talked a lot about for newer investors who they get to maybe 5 doors and they're excited because they're counting the doors and they stop looking at the doors and they keep going to acquisition. It's like, well, is there anything there that you could trade out for something better? Like you're saying, you can sometimes trade one property for 2, which is a great way to add more, or you can trade one short-term rental for an upgraded one that's going to earn you more. And that's just important. A lot of times with short-term rentals, you're going to sell the furniture with it, so you're going to get that on the side also. That's just a very smart. I grew up with a dad who traded. He held a lot, but he liked to trade. When the market was up, he would sell any house that we lived in. And I still feel the same way, to my kids' detriment over the years, but we always would get another nice house. But it's like, when the market's hot, I sell. I don't care. I'll just get another house. And I think that's really important to note, that although we started by saying like how important holding is, it's still important to hold and evaluate and upgrade, because then you don't have to rely on the extra income. Can be in stocks, index funds, and other things.
Well, and even one of my short-term rentals, it's actually not far from here, and it's my favorite one. I go there as much as I can. My family goes there. We actually use it and love it. And I tell people it's my retirement home.
Yeah.
But it's being paid off right now. But that property, we actually took money out of it. So we put a little bit of money we did put a little bit of a rehab into it, not a major, but anyways, so we forced the equity. We took money out of it to buy more properties, to buy the next short-term rental. That property actually barely cash flows for me. I don't own that short-term rental for the cash flow, but I did a huge, huge cost segregation on it.
Yeah.
So
great.
that I did not pay a dime to federal taxes that year.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the most exciting thing is, every year I'm building my wealth and growing my portfolio and paying less and less and less and less taxes. That to me, now my wealth is even projected even more. That's the secret sauce. I mean, that's the way the rich have been doing it.
Yeah, and you, when you have multiple properties, you can look at the cost seg and decide which year to use it, so you can balance it out every time. And that's kind of like you said, there it is. There's the secret sauce. I don't think you need as many properties as people think if you can reduce your burdens. And then as well, like we were just talking about, upgrade properties from time to time, see what's out there, and get creative. The more properties that you have, the more properties show up for you as well. The more investors you know, the more properties show up for you. So you get more options as you get more activity going in your own properties, right?
Yeah. So, since then I've actually gone back to long-term rentals. I don't believe in just one asset class and that's all you do,
Yeah,
or
I
one
agree.
type.
Yeah.
And I feel good with my short-term rental portfolio and it's done its job. And if another opportunity came up, I would definitely consider it. But I like long-term rentals now. So I'm at the phase where I'm like, I want to be as passive as possible.
Yeah.
So now I'm just kind of building up long-term rentals, and I've been mostly doing turnkey again, just because it fits my lifestyle.
Yeah.
I did flips. I've done about 50 flips with a
Oh, wow.
partner.
Awesome.
And so, but that partner wanted to sell them. So it was just income that I could put into growing my portfolio.
Right.
And so I wish we held them.
I love some of my flips so much. I always get that I would live here. And then I'm like, I don't want to live here. I mean, I do want to live here, but I can't. I like my house also. Yeah. But that diversification is so important across any, assets. But in real estate, I think it's just for the pure enjoyment also. I get bored easily. So just having all the same assets is just not that fun to me. So I'm similar to you. I think as I get older, I look at things differently. I'm like, now I'm averaging into more passive, or at least things that are more passive for me because of my experience. But yeah, I'm looking more at turnkey syndications, things that I don't have to be as involved in. But then I can then get a couple things that I need more involvement, like short-term rentals that produce a lot, where maybe that's going to be fun for me. I just like real estate. I mean, it's kind of fun, right? I mean, you seem to enjoy it. It's just, you change each year of what you want to do and swap some stuff out.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that's the magic of real estate. I mean, literally, I will talk about it all day, every day. My kids literally are like, Mom, don't talk about real estate at this event.
I know that face well. Mine are 23 and 21, and they're like, really, with what you're making off this? I'm like, I'm trying to tell you, they're your properties eventually. Like, let's get on board here.
Well, and that's the thing too, is so one thing that I've been able to do is I specifically bought, so also kind of following my husband's grandmother, when we moved to California, a couple of my kids wanted to do some acting and modeling. And so they got involved in some stuff, super cute stuff, nothing big, but they made some money. And so we were able to put that money into rental properties for them.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
So my daughter, when she was 9 or 10, she owned a rental property. And obviously I took out the loan, but it was her money. All of it was her money.
Yeah.
And today we ran the numbers on it. That property will pay for her college.
Yeah. I mean, it's as old as time. Like you said, these are things that people were doing a long time ago. There just were no, creative acronyms and social media to push it out there. But these are systems and ideas that people used. I had owned tons of properties in trust before I was 18 and was involved in them, collecting rent, going to them, meeting the tenants. My dad was just smart about how he structured them. Some of he did weird. He was an attorney and just kind of, created the trust on his own, which I understand. But yeah, I mean, real estate's such a great vehicle. It's great for not just the generational wealth, but for that generational connection. I mean, just in this conversation, we've talked of your husband's grandmother all the way to your kids. That's generationally significant between. And, I want my kids to know that it's going to be a part of their future, whether they enjoy it or not. They could always sell everything, but it's not smart. They'll want to buy stuff later.
Well, one of my daughters, I've got 3, she graduated from college last year and she's an art major. And that's scary to go out in the world as an art major.
Yeah.
But you know what? She's learned, she's been here. She knows she said that she doesn't rely on this portfolio, but at the same time, it does give your children some type of security and comfort to know that they are learning this. She owns a rental property as well. She took her money from modeling and was able to buy a property as well. And same with her brother. And so she has that in her pocket and she's learning it. So now she can go, what can I dream of? What do I want to be? What do I want to do? To me, that freedom that they can actually go to school for fun and not out of, work and being stuck in a cubicle, that's everything. That's all I want.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you look at it now, that's really what everybody's chasing. It's time freedom, the ability to do what you want when you want. And if you're a parent and you can get that started for your kids early, some people, values wise think that, oh, giving them time freedom too early won't work out for them. But it just depends on your parenting style. I grew up with hippie parents. I did what I want. My dad gave me a stock account when I was like 14 or 15 and said, invest in stocks. If you lose all the money, whatever. I made a lot of money. So I try to do the same for my kids within boundaries. It's a little bit different now because they have the internet to look up things. So they're, a little bit less likely to want to hear the stuff that we're saying. But yeah, I love the principles and I love, having it involved as part of that kind of family legacy. And then they can learn about other stuff as well. I mean, I think investing is fun as a whole, as long as you're safe and, you mitigate the risk along the way.
Yeah, if you're educated.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's start there.
Yeah, well, they've learned that from this episode because you went in kind of like wild into the first couple, but hopeful. And I think that's the way a lot of people are going into it now because look, there's so much more content out there that makes it seem easy, and it's not easy. I mean, just being a landlord is not easy. In the best case scenario, it seems great, but it's almost never that perfect. Things happen. Fires happen, furnaces break, people move in as couples, then they break up and they can't afford the rent. People just forget about all these things that could happen. And it's part of things that you have to deal with. And it's not things that all property managers are going to be ready for on your behalf.
Well, there's also, there are a lot of bad players out there. There are people out there
Yeah.
that want to take care or take advantage of new investors. Everybody out there from, all these real estate gurus,
yeah,
to property managers, to turnkey companies, to anybody, flippers.
Yeah.
I've gotten ripped off from contractors, and
oh, me too. This is part of being an investor. Yeah. And we know stuff. So,
Right. Exactly. That's what's scary is people trusting people too much. And if you don't have the education, you have to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
And if you don't know it, then you're not going to understand it, which means you're going to get taken advantage of at some point.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. But I also see a subset of people who they're in forums, blaming the tenant or blaming these companies. And then you look at it and you're like, I think you were just hoping for a free ride. You were hoping to pay and it just return assets like that. You didn't want to do any work. So I find a lot of user error. I do find there's a lot of fake gurus out there, but I also find a lot of user error for people who sign up for something thinking that them just going to, a 2-week class is going to then make them a millionaire. And then they don't realize they actually have to do stuff.
Yeah. Expectations are off.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem is you got to set expectations with yourself and be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so tell us how you want to create your new legacy of helping women get set up to be that investor that your husband's grandmother was and that you've become.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story here, I think, is education. That's really what it is. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so that is my number one goal. I've been working with investors really for the past 6 years while I was on my journey as well. And I've seen a lot of people, like you said, fail or point fingers or all that stuff. And I think that it absolutely comes down to education. So my number one goal is to educate more women to know the power that to empower them to know what they can do and what is possible, but also why real estate? What can real estate do for you? All the profit centers, all the things that we talked about from, the more advanced strategies like cost segregation and 1031, I think you need to know about that because that's what's going to help you really make decisions and grow. And so it's not just as simple as, you can go and buy a turnkey property and that's fine if you want to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But you've got to understand all the benefits. You can take advantage of them. And so that you can get your time freedom back. So that's the number one thing is I'm focused on educating women.
Yeah, and I think if you just go back to the story about your husband's grandmother, the unique independence that she created by using her own money made from real estate to invest in more real estate was dynamic at the time, but still something that's necessary for all parties who feel like, hey, I don't do anything on my own. This part, I created this, I'm making this, we'll sink it into something so you have something there for yourself. Both parties can do that in a relationship and not feel like it's a breach of the relationship. And I think it's important, independence is good in relationships and outside of them. And it's a very important note. So is the best place for people to get in touch with you and find out information about you at hellomelissanash.com.
What I actually put together that was really cool is I have a 12-day, it's a free 12-day email course.
Yeah, awesome.
And so basically what you do is you go to that website, www.hellomelissanash.com. And then right there should be a link and they can sign up for that free 12-day email course. And every day you're going to get an email with real estate knowledge. You don't have to log into a course. You don't have to go anywhere. Literally it just pops up in your email box.
Yeah, I see it right on the homepage there.
Yeah.
Free 12-day real estate email course. Click the button and you're in.
Yeah, people have been absolutely loving that. And so, like I said, the more education that we have, the more knowledge we have, the more we're all going to be better off teaching our kids about it all. Generational wealth is just knowledge. We need that knowledge.
Yeah. And I love email courses as well because they come to you and you can read them on your own time. You can batch them, keep 5, keep them in a folder and then go, boom. Oh, wow, that was actually really good. Let me go to the next one. So yeah, I really enjoy that. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed the conversation, going deep all the way back to generations and getting all the way forward with your journey. So thanks so much for spending the time with us. And they can find you and get in touch with you through the About section or the Contact section on there?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. Yeah. And on social, you're Hello Melissa Nash pretty much everywhere, right?
Yep. Super easy to find. I'm trying to get on the Instagram thing. It's really hard. It's just tricky. You talk about algorithms. It's kind of like, the Airbnb algorithm, I think.
Yeah. I call the algorithms all devils. So I just ignore them and do whatever I want on social and expect nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I would rather put the time into helping clients than,
absolutely.
So I am on there, but definitely my website is the place to be.
All right, Melissa. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much. I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. Likewise. It was great. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. That was Melissa Nash of Lady Luck Investments. Again, you can find that email course at Hello Melissa Nash right on the homepage. Free 12-day real estate email course. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end so you can get a preview of who's coming up on the next episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. And it's a return guest, my friend Devon Kennard. Yes, that Devon Kennard, former NFL veteran, real estate investor, now lender with a new book out called Real Estate Side Hustle. I can't wait for you to hear this episode, Devon's second appearance with us next time.